The views and opinions expressed during this show do not necessarily reflect the policy
or position of any affiliated workplace or employer.
The views and opinions of this show do not constitute recommendations for therapy.
Please contact a licensed SLP for individual consult
on your situation.
Please listen carefully.
What is communication?
Communication is life.
Essential behavior of life. We have the both blessing and responsibility of trying to foster in others.
It's transmitting a thought from one person to another.
It's the strongest way for two people to convey information to each other.
The back and forth between two people.
Communication is a lifeline.
It's just connection with other people.
Connecting people in terms of ideas or thoughts or needs.
Draws us out of ourselves, draws us into that relationship, builds up our families. Without it, we'd be lost.
Whatever it is that we do to express intent and achieve an impact.
Communication is the ability to express your needs, wants, frustrations, and desires to anyone that you feel needs to have that information.
Welcome to Speech Science episode number 173. I'm Matt Hott, a speech and language pathologist working in the schools and in home health care with dementia and stroke patients, joined as always by our PTSD SLP from the dry state of Florida, Rachel Archambault.
I wish. Hello.
Hello. And our pediatric and research expert living in Texas, Michelle Wintering.
How's it going, Matt?
Hello. And joining us back on air for the first time in about a year, she's our voice expert, as well as an adult medical and gender affirming voice care expert in Northern California, Ruchi Capella.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Hello, Ruchi. Hello, Rachel. Hello, Michelle. Oh my gosh. Do you know what this means now?
What?
We have finally found someone to be on air with us that does not have the letter M to start their name. Rachel, you're no longer by yourself.
We have two R's.
Two R's, yeah.
Right. M,
yeah. Three M's.
M and R. M-R-M-R-M. That is now our show.
Look at that. And thank you for another time zone, because I always get a bunch of a bunch of feedback on that from my co-host, right?
Oh my goodness. On today's show, we're going to look at what is happening in ASHA, and it's something you might actually be interested in and should listen to, as well as looking at the impact teletherapy had about showing up for therapy. We're going to dig into some burnout and school-based speech language pathologists, as well as our due process and our shout-outs. But before all of that, we want to make sure that we hear from you. Head to our website, speechsciencepodcast.com, and you can email us speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com. And this week on Discord, for the Speech Science Discord, it's had some interesting discussions around food and really no therapy topics, which is the reason I bring this question to you this week. Normally, I ask you how your week is. I want to know what book, podcast, or movie are you guys, or I guess TV show, are you guys really digging into that you think other people should listen to? The thing I'm listening to this week is a book by Bob Iger, the new and former CEO of Disney, The Ride of a Lifetime. And I am picking up a bunch of stuff I'm going to be using in coaching. So I found out that I wish I could be Bob Iger. That is what is happening.
Sounds like an interesting book.
Rachel, I've had 8 Audible credits and I almost had them expire again. So I'm trying to do it. But I'm only in chapter 5, and he's talking a lot about how he's had to learn to be a good manager and how to get people to strive for greatness, but not being afraid to fail. So there's like this balance between striving for greatness, but being afraid to fail. And as a good leader, we need to be able to instill that drive for success, but not fear of failure. So
I think that's great. And from what I know about Bob Iger is that he's very well respected for what he does with Disney. So I like seeing a kind of book like that to show management skills rather than someone who is not well liked by their, employees. So
you mean Governor Santa? I mean the guy down there?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. No. Oh, who's got a good show, book, movie?
I just finished a book for my book club that I'm in just recently. I'm trying to keep up with the book club. I'm bad about starting them and then not keeping up with them with life, but trying to read more. So I just finished Lessons in Chemistry, a fictional book. Yeah, by
Never heard of that.
Bonnie Garmis, I think her name is.
I've heard great things about it.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's about a chemist, a woman, and who is a chemist in the 1950s. Fighting against discrimination and pushback because she's a female. And the story is it wasn't as predictable as I thought it would be. I'll say that. So I thought it was a good read. I didn't see everything coming that it threw in there. And the dog is actually, it's fiction. And the dog is actually one of the narrators that they jump between.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it's a good lighter read.
Okay. I have it on my list.
It's got some heavy topics, I will say that, in it, but it goes quickly.
It sounds cool.
Rachel, Ruchi, ours.
I am switching between Ted Lasso for every episode that comes out with that, and then Marvelous Miss Maisel. This is the final season, so I haven't watched the last episode that came out because I want to watch like 2 or 3 at the same time instead of just one episode. But I think there's only 2 episodes left of the entire series, and it's really interesting the time jump that they've had. It's been a really nice show.
I haven't watched any of the season yet, so I'm excited too.
It's good.
Ted Lasso or Miss
Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I'm working my way through Ted Lasso.
My wife is on season 1, so I'm not allowed to watch season 3 yet.
That's fair.
Ruchi, I think I know what you said you were going to bring up. What do you got?
So I, as a good speech language pathologist in quotation marks, I recently got Manual Therapy for Voice and Swallowing, a person-centered approach by Walt Fritz came in the mail. And so finally, that's fresh on print. I haven't gotten to do any of my social media shares, but a lot of wonderful photographs that are really helpful in terms of doing manual therapy approach for voice considerations. And it was an excellent training that I went to. So like a nice refresher. The other book that I'm really excited about that I should be getting in tomorrow is A Day with No Words by Tiffany or Tiff Hammond. She's a Black autistic mother advocate with 2 Black autistic adolescent children, teenage children. And so it's really basically a picture book or a storybook that's about I think the use of AAC or multimodal communication and not like centering verbal communication from, the Black autistic perspective, which I think is really awesome and something that I wanted to highlight today. I'm watching Succession. I think Succession should also be like how to not try to market yourself as a speech language pathologist on social media. how to so it's been interesting to watch that and just feel like, oh, okay, it's nice to be an independent, somewhat kind of like under the radar little SLP private practice owner just chugging along like Thomas the Train Engine.
So I've always I love Succession. I'm like way behind. It's one of those shows that my wife watches without me. So if I'm lucky enough to be in the room when it's on, then I'm caught up to the most recent episode. And if not, I'm way episodes behind. But when I worked in TV, it really felt like the moment the manager or anchor passed away or got fired, you'd have everyone climbing in for that spot. I'm kind of happy that doesn't happen in the school setting. I'm glad that when I go on lunch, there are not 4 other SLPs plotting on selling my office behind me.
That you know of.
That I know of. Yeah, that's true.
They wouldn't get much money off your office, though.
I just got pictures. I got to go see my new office, y'all.
Nice. Do you like it?
I don't know if I'll be able to put a table in there for group therapy, and my wall is really yellow, and I can't hang anything for the first year and a half. But it smells like new paint and wood, so I'm excited.
First year and a half? What is that?
I guess they need to make sure that the walls stay up and that they can take good photos for everybody to look at the new building.
It's a very arbitrary timeline.
No. And I was going to say, I saw the pictures of your room, and with the yellow, all those fluorescent lights would be off. Get a lamp.
It's gold. It's gold. Not
it's yellow. It's yellow. It's so bright. It's so distracting. Just turn those lights off, get a little lamp, and that would be so much better.
I'm going to get one of those. I have it in behind me. It's like one of those 4, 5 bulb ones that you can rearrange. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we want to hear from you. Make sure you send us your book, podcast, movie, TV show recommendations. Are you good at your job like Ruchi and you're reading both for fun and school or for job? Or are you like me who is listening to Disney in any way you can? speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com. When something is good, we want to hear about it. That's why we have the SSPOD Shoutout is our opportunity to single out somebody or someone doing something super awesome in our field. And I thought for this one, down in Texas, I'm going to probably mispronounce it, Tarleton State University has their very first communication science and disorders cohort graduating this spring. So shout out to the Tarleton State University graduates. Welcome to our field. Of the 4 in their cohort, I believe 2 already have jobs.
Wow. Yeah, there you go.
Tarleton was not on our last episode about the top 223 grad schools in America.
I don't know where that is. I'm not a true Texan. I know that. So I don't know all of Texas universities, but I'm not sure where that is. I'm looking it up now.
Stephenville, Texas. Y'all ever been down there?
No, but it looks like they have campuses in Waco and Fort Worth as well.
It's a
member of the A&M University system. Cool. So there you go.
As somebody who grew up in Texas, I'm just like, so what's the proximity to Lubbock, Dallas, Houston, Austin, or San Antonio? These are the things I know. Okay, El Paso, I always forget about you. I apologize. But
I know I lived there for 3 years.
Ooh, it is just southwest of Fort Worth.
That makes
sense.
And northwest of Waco, near Eastland, between Comanche and Granbury. I don't know. I don't live in Texas, y'all. So
Texas is a huge state, though. So even if you live in Texas, you could be hours and hours away.
Maybe I'll go take a trip there because I'm going back to Fort Worth this summer because I bought Greta Van Fleet tickets.
Oh, that's right. That's your concert from last year.
Yes, which I went in March. And then they released another tour and I had to get tickets. My brothers live in Dallas. So it's not like I'm just flying to wherever. I'm flying to Fort Worth.
It's an hour and 10 minutes from Fort Worth.
Yes.
Are your brothers going to the concert too?
I haven't picked my +1 yet.
Ooh,
so
okay.
Whoever's lucky enough to go with me.
We could give that away on air. speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com. Why should you be Rachel's +1 to go to Fort Worth, visit the new Tarleton State University grad program, and go see Greta Van Fleet? I like it. Congratulations to the 4 who have graduated from Tarleton. How big was y'all's cohorts? We had what, Michelle? We had 20. I was in the Omni program, so I had 10.
Yeah,
but technically ours
different.
was 23, 25. Rachel, how many was yours?
We started with 30, but that was 5 from the consortium track that it took them 5 years to graduate. And then we ended up with 25, I think.
Ruchi?
I don't know. I made something like 12 to 15 in our immediate. And then we had an overlapping cohort that probably had 20 some odd folks in that. So just like who had done undergrad in something else.
I give shout out. It says the 4 is Morgan, Ailey, Norma, and Jillian of different parts of Texas. I give shout out. We had like the 2025 in our group, Michelle. And I know like if there was only 4 of us, you run that risk of like, I hope you like everyone in your grad program.
Yep. There you go. But I mean, also great for them being the first cohort going through them. That's a big deal. You're laying the groundwork for everybody else behind you and the experimental group for a lot of people too, professors and program wise. So congrats.
On the flip side of the SSPOD Shoutout is where things are not going right. You can do it as the SSPOD Due Process. This week, the due process was sparked by an online conversation about whether a person with a communication deficit should be hired and what becomes of our role if we are working in or around or hear that kind of conversation. So what is our role? How far do we step into something to say, hey, that feels very discriminatory when maybe we're not part of the hiring team? Where does that, as advocates for folks with communication deficits or delays, what is our role in all of this?
I think it's a problem to it basically sets the precedent that speech pathologists need to have a perfect way of speech. It is, and perfect is set by the person that's doing the hiring, right? So in my cohort, I can think of, we were in our final semester of grad school, and I remember this girl that I had just been with for the 6 semesters came out of our professor's office crying, and she was like, she was basically scolded for having a lisp. She was saying that you should probably work in the medical side of it because you can't teach kids how to make sounds when you can't make sounds correctly. And I just remember her name has a ton of S's and a ton of R's. And she's like, I don't have a lisp. And she had like a very, very slight one, but to be told that you can't be an SLP because you can't say things the right way, where does it stop? You know, I think of people regionally, how different sounds are made, and we're not going to say, oh, you know what, I can't hire you from New York because we're in Texas and we say things differently, or vice versa. So I think it's completely inappropriate, and we are going after the most highly qualified, and it's not how that comes across.
You know, and I'm thinking to this post that was deleted, right? That was talking about hiring an educator, I believe an early education person, because I saw the post before it was then deleted. And I took it when I read the post that this anonymous poster was wondering, my hope is that maybe they were advocating for hiring this person if the hiring team had questions. I don't know because I can't look back at the post, but
I know.
But if I were on a hiring team, and for me, having been hired in multiple different states with different populations, we were just talking off air about El Paso, Texas, where as a native English speaker, I was not a preferred candidate in a lot of places, right? And not a fluent bilingual Spanish speaker. But just like you said, Rachel, if we're talking about advocating for people with different communication modalities or different communication needs, what we're talking about with a lisp is, to me, no different than an accent or a regional different way of saying things, or
a stutter.
A stutter, yeah. It's something that
you can't be a lawyer because you stutter. Like that is so wildly inappropriate to make that kind of general statement, I feel.
Yep. And that if we're talking about their qualifications for something, are they the best person for the job? Right. And are they the best qualified candidate? Not how do they produce the S sound? And I will say, I mean, I remember a good friend of mine who taking a role in a youth leadership program, and it was brought to his attention when they were looking at a promotion for him about a communication difference involving a lisp and some different sounds, because he was going to be in a public speaking role. They weren't saying he couldn't have it, but I did appreciate that they actually pulled him aside and had a conversation with him about being able to be understood by a wide variety of people. But it wasn't, I thought on that interview team, it was a good way of doing it. It wasn't like, oh, we're not hiring this person or considering them for this promotion because of X. It was like, hey, how can we support you to make sure more people can understand you, and that this is not a detriment to you in this role in any way. So I think there's a way that you could approach it that is person-centered without it being an attack on a communication difference that they don't have control over.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's about, is somebody functionally intelligible and overall comprehensible in their work? Children in education settings are going to be bombarded with a lot of different productions of phonemes from a lot of different types of people. Yeah. Even when we think about hiring people whose phonetic inventory is going to be different than a monolingual English speaker, we have to have flexibility around that. There is obviously a lot of pushback within the profession with regard to requiring people to do accent mod and what the functionality is and whether something is really appropriate for somebody's job description or what they're working on. And at the end of the day, we live in a world with a lot of technological advancement. We can use video resources, articulatory tools like puppets and all of these things, other students as models. When we're talking about considering people for a job based on, phonetic or phonemic inventory with their L1, like that shouldn't really necessarily play into the role. And we do have the advantage of having a lot of video samples, audio samples, apps, other teaching tools to help with articulatory targets. And we have to remember, if it was a speech language pathologist in this consideration, we're not teaching anything when it comes to phonetics or articulation in a vacuum, as it were. So it's about kind of using all of these resources and finding a workaround. If you have a SLP to demonstrate, then what would the issue really be?
And Ruchi, you do voice, correct?
Yeah.
Voice therapy?
My better days. Yeah, sure.
How much articulatory therapy are you doing on a weekly basis?
You'd be surprised. I mean, I do talk a lot about articulatory placement when it comes to gender affirming voice care. So it does happen. But then at the same time, you might run into somebody who does have a frontal or lateral lisp like presentation or different sibilant presentation, and they don't want to change it. And we also hear about kids who middle school, high school, they'll self-advocate and be like, I really don't want to work on this anymore. And we have to normalize that those people can still get hired because they've exercised a choice in terms of how they want to sound.
Absolutely.
I work in a middle school right now. They all want to pick up somebody as a date. So they all want to fix their R's and L's and W's right now. But when they get to the high school, they're much more comfortable with it. So.
Well, and Matt, I wanted to ask you, coming from a radio and media background, because this conversation got me thinking about other fields like reporters and newscasters who I do think probably even more so than our field face some discrimination with accents and ways of speech.
So the first person I immediately think of when I think of an actor or an actress with a lisp is Elastigirl. And I can't think of the actress's name right now because it just escaped me off the top of my head. Holly Hunter. Holly Hunter has made a career because she's a great actress, but she's also got such a distinct voice. And all of us would say, oh yeah, she's failing the Goldman Fristo or the Arizona because of that lateralized lisp. When it comes to newscasters, when it comes to radio DJs with lisps or rolled R's, I mean, who's the guy on Big Bang Theory with the rolled R?
That's a throwback, Matt.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think of many news people with speech differences. Michael Strahan, Barbara Walters was vilified, for how, and I understand that people go through that accent modification in order for people to understand, and they lose those accents from a professional standpoint because they feel that they need to, or they're told that they have to do that. And I hope that we have come some way that they can start to speak with their natural cadence, and we shouldn't have to make it so standard in a way. I don't know.
Well, then what would you guys, what would you all say then our role as SLPs are? Obviously on hiring teams, we can advocate to say this should not be relevant to if they can perform this job. But what is our role? I want your opinions. What is our role as SLPs to advocate for people?
People listen to us. When did that happen? They care what we think.
They do during Better Speech and Hearing Month or Hearing
great.
Speech Month.
I think nobody lets me forget about that. But I think we can do a lot of education around what are functional outcomes. Some people change their productions and some people don't. Some people live full and happy and productive lives not changing them. And it's a matter of personal agency. And at the end of the day, is the semantic message kind of coming across? And that message is not going to just be delivered by a teacher lecturing or an educator lecturing, right? It's also going to be print resources, multimedia resources. So it's not that everything is going to be dependent on the articulation of the teacher, right?
I kind of feel that our job, and I agree with you, Ruchi, but I think our job, whenever we hear any type of discriminatory comments, should be sticking up for everyone. I mean, that sounds like such a generic attitude. But what I mean, yeah, go for it. Sorry, Rachel.
People don't feel that it is discriminatory.
And that's what I'm saying is that we should step up for that, though. That's what I'm saying is like,
yes,
if we hear like, oh, that person's got a lisp on their L's, they won't be a good kindergarten teacher. That's where we really have to say, like, you know, like what Ruchi was saying, we don't learn phonemes by one person talking. We hear them from everybody. Then that's where we throw out like the whole idea of what is discriminatory. I had a coworker who I like at a Christmas party, didn't realize that my daughter was deaf, but then said something about, you know, all of us are going to lose our hearing, and then Mr. Hot's going to make sure that we help us so that we all don't up deaf. And then afterwards I was like, yo, Vic, do you know my daughter's deaf? And he was like, oh, I didn't mean it like in a negative. And I was like, well, you're kind of using her, you know, disability as like a joke. And I think, and he didn't mean it like that at all. And he profusely apologized, and we're still fine to this day. But like, I feel like our job is to stick up for those who don't necessarily can or want to in that situation. Does that make sense?
Yes, there's those ableist comments that I think we have a responsibility for calling them out. But regarding this speech discrimination for jobs of people that have speech differences, we're going to have clients that want to fix in their terms. They want to sound a certain way. We can help support them. That is our scope, is to help support our patients in what their goals are. I think that's like period. That's you know,
and
it's what
Ruchi,
their goals are.
What was the term you said? You said it a minute ago. And
advocacy.
I can't think of it. Yeah, but self-advocacy, but their own goals. What Rachel's getting at too.
Yeah, I mean that there needs to be client-centered focus, and the understanding that like those decisions can go a lot of different ways, and all of that has to be validated. Yeah.
Okay. We want to hear. I thought there was going to be more. I apologize. We want to hear from you. speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com or speechsciencepodcast.com. All right. So that brings us to our very first article. It was in the American Journal for Speech Language Pathology, a comparison of voice therapy attendance rates between in-person and telepractice. And would you know that when you give people more access to therapy, guess what they do? They show up. They don't cancel as often. It's amazing. Now, I only had to do, I do a couple private patients on teletherapy, and then everything else I do is in person. I can honestly say that I have only had a teletherapy patient cancel one time in 3 years. And that was because of like internet outage. Where in-person therapy, I am lucky if I have less than 3 cancellations a week.
Totally. And I'm not in voice therapy, but just I attend therapy. I do therapy with a mental health counselor, usually every 3 weeks or so. And I would not be attending if it were in person. I've gone consistently for 5 years now. And thankfully, when COVID happened, it went all virtual, and she has remained that way, and that fits into my schedule. Otherwise I would be driving there, you know, it would take about 3 hours of my day to do that, and that would be tossed aside. So I completely understand this. I see this, and I hope that the accessibility is allowing people to participate in voice therapy when they might not have said, oh, you know what, I don't really want to go anywhere and do that, or I don't have the access to go in person. I think that is the big benefit here.
Yeah, I mean, I established my private practice and that was focusing more on gender affirming voice and singing voice specialty in 2020. So, you know, I definitely, like, everything I do is via telepractice. And so I do, I mean, because of the subspecialty and because of, you know, just like lots of like waxing and waning that can happen in the community, I definitely do get like no shows at times or cancellations because of outage. Probably not like, you know, perfect attendance, but it is much easier system to be able to reschedule people, do not have the consideration for transport or like, do I have to be concerned about, you know, will I be able to use the bathroom there because I'm a trans or gender nonconforming person? That's a whole other kit and caboodle consideration for anybody who has a brick and mortar, and being able to advocate for those pieces. So being able to have let a client have control over their environment, making sure that they feel safe and comfortable doing what they're doing, and being able to sign on kind of at a last minute notice versus having to prepare driving 30 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, however long, to be able to see you makes a huge difference. But I will say about the article, like, I think one of the things that was surprising was they had compared it from 2019 for in-person services in 2020 for telepractice. So there has to be also a variable of people going through COVID and social isolation. And that is probably some variable that you have to map for, like, people just wanting social interaction, and that also boosting the level of attendance initiation, as well as like minimizing no-shows and cancellations. It's something to think about.
I think it's an interesting starting point, though, because we are, if you think back to the COVID days, and there was the big fight and uproar, or I'm sorry, pre-COVID days, about what is the impact telepractice is going to have on our jobs. Is it going to cause folks to lose jobs? Are you going to see school districts decide it's cheaper to hire somebody from another city to serve those students? And then all of a sudden we got thrown into COVID, where we all had to learn how to do telepractice really overnight. And now what I like about a study like this is that it does give a little bit more credence. If you want to say, I want to add a little I want to add a telepractice to my private practice, or I'm willing to do teletherapy online because a student is unable to come into the school building, or, just because like you said, Ruchi, you can meet this patient or the student where they're at instead of forcing them to come into our arena. It's almost like home care, but better in my eyes.
Well, and then you made me think too, Matt, because we've touched on the transportation piece. They don't have to have a working car or someone to drive them. If you're talking with young people, or if people who have children, childcare, or if they can bring children with them to an appointment. And then I was also thinking just a comfort piece, right? Being in your home. And then if you're worried about not even just COVID, but flu season and all those things, I've had patients who are much more comfortable with, yes, I can still see you over teletherapy because we have someone in our house who's not feeling well, or such and such might have the flu, or I'm coming down with a little bit of a cough and I don't want to be in person, but I can meet with you.
Or they're immunocompromised.
Yes.
That's the other side of it.
Yes,
so it's accessibility for disability.
Or PTSD from coming into school.
There's a whole bunch of reasons. I am a big fan of teletherapy. I think that it is a benefit overall. To be able to provide this to people who wouldn't have the services otherwise, and might even feel more comfortable with this modality.
Now, Ruchi, do you do mostly teletherapy or all teletherapy?
It's all teletherapy at this time. Yeah. I mean, I consider like making the switch, but it's a lot to do.
Yeah.
And I think, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's probably cheaper from a business side too, because you don't need like an office space for 40 people.
Yeah. I mean, it works really well for my needs. I think, especially doing voice and gender affirming voice considerations, it really, I think, pushes the client, this is not specific to me. I think this is specific to voice practitioners who work in this way anyway, that they have to rely on themselves. They have to rely on their own ears. They're like navigating certain things like circumlaryngeal massage. I can demonstrate, I'm describing how much pressure I have to apply and where, but the client also has to kind of like do that for themselves and not say, okay, well, this practitioner is going to do it for me, but I'm not really sure how to do it on my own or approximating. So it kind of puts the onus on the client to be able to, kind of push forward in terms of approximating their targets or doing their warm-ups or whatever it is. And you're already kind of doing it in the setting that they normally would. So the advantage of home health, where you're having functional kind of intervention that already kind of happens, it is like a home health plus kind of benefit that they're already in the space where they do these things.
When I do my teletherapy, and I don't want to speak for everyone that does teletherapy, I realize I have to become a better therapist just for what you just described, Ruchi. I'm thinking of a patient that I've worked with trying to improve, going back to what we were just talking about, improving their articulation and voice control and loudness. And I'm trying to say, oh, what I need you to do is to feel it. And it's like, oh my gosh, I need to learn how to describe it better than just like, oh, you know, that motion you feel in here. Like, it is making me a better therapist to describe it in a way that somebody who's not an SLP understands it.
Yeah. The irony is that because I've played video games so much, I can really describe so many of the like voice considerations, like kinesthetic feelings based off of things like that. Like I was like, you don't want to crash the helicopter in GTA when you're doing diaphragmatic breathing and flow phonation, right? But only a few people are going to understand what I said, and that's okay. We'll talk about it later.
My son and I will log on to TikTok together to watch, sorry, not related to this at all, but there is a quadriplegic video gamer, streamer, Twitcher, TikToker, who uses breaths and sucking and movement to play Fortnite. So my son and I will watch him play every week. Like, and my son is blown away that this dude is like running Fortnite scores up, and he's just using breath support. So
that's interesting.
Awesome.
We want to hear from you. speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com or speechsciencepodcast.com. Are you doing teletherapy? Have you noticed a rise or fall in your no-shows? Our second article is coming out of the Language, Speech, and Hearing Services in Schools Journal, and school-based speech language pathologist stress and burnout, a cross-sectional survey at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. And not surprising to anyone currently in the field, 65% of the people surveyed are looking to leave the field within the next 3 years.
Yep.
Who would have thought our job is overstressed, underappreciated, and also emotionally draining as part of what they cited in the study, leading to higher burnout rates?
I don't feel like I have a whole lot to add to it.
It's kind of like, how was your car crash? Was it as terrible as it looked? It is. What they say is the factors include caseload size, severity of the treated disorders, availability of resources. Of course, this was a study during COVID, I guess COVID situations in the school, but I don't think many things have changed. Actually, I think things have gotten back to normal in my school district, which feels not as good as they were during the COVID times.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I would just add, I know I don't want to say it all comes back to money, but often it feels like it does. Because if you compare speech pathology, and we have talked about this on air before, to other, I will say, education matched medical professions with the same amount of years and clinical hours as we have, we are on the very low end of that pay. Across settings, especially in schools. And so there isn't the money in our field to keep people in it when they can find other fields they can go to and make close to that same range for way less stress.
Totally. And I always talk about educators that we're lumped into the same category as them a lot, especially school-based SLPs, which contributes to why our salary is low and everything. But a study came out a few years ago about teachers that the retention rate, it was like the first year, 50% of teachers don't return. And then with 5 years,
first 3 or 5, yeah.
It's drops. Like close to 100%. Like they're done. So why is that? It's not just because they don't feel like it. Like there are reasons, and there are many reasons listed here. And shout out to Shannon Hall Mills and Kelly. I can never say your last name. Sorry, my brain is really rough today. But I've met you both, and thank you for doing this article. I think that it's really important. And honestly, I hope that school-based SLPs use this article to negotiate with their districts why they should increase salaries. I already printed this out, and I will be bringing it to my union. And I'm part of the teachers union because we are in discussions right now for raising the salary because of how bad it is this year in our district. This is a major help. So thank you all for creating this article. And please, all of you out there that are struggling with a lot of these issues, especially in the school system, show this to your superiors.
Yeah, Rachel, I'm glad that you talked about collective bargaining because, I want to give a shout out and much love to Oakland Unified School District, which is in the area. They've gone on strike since I believe May 4th.
Wow.
Which is continuing. And so a bunch of speech language pathologists out there picketing alongside educators. And this is, I think that's what the crux of this is about, that they're not getting enough pay and the caseloads are not appropriate and they're not getting the support that they need. So there is a demonstration for that. There is a history for that. And I think everybody who is being impacted in this way, and from one, former acute care or inpatient medical SLP, school SLPs, you have a much harder job from my standpoint, because at least I can finish my documentation that day. Or if I have to go, I don't like to document off the clock, but if I had to, I could and get things done. What you have to do day in and day out, and it feels like the job is never done for 9 months out of the year to 12 months out of the year, depending. It's just, it's way too much depending on some of the caseloads that you get, and you deserve better.
They state in the article, quote, the trajectory of the data available to researchers and other stakeholders suggests that SLPs are abandoning the school setting at an alarming rate. And what we have to do is that SLPs in the schools require advocates at all levels who will fight for their right for more time to prepare paperwork, prepare for therapy sessions, and consume research, their right to equitable compensation for their workloads and training, and right to effective work-life balance. It goes back to what we were talking about last week. There's the last episode, 17-year delay from research to in practice. That if I am an overworked SLP, you know how much time I get to look at research at my job? 30 minutes a week. I am hoping the article that I have picked that week for 30 minutes is going to help my students. Odds are it probably doesn't, because I don't know what I'm picking up to read. But I'm not surprised by any of this either, which is the sucky
having
part.
worked in a school for 4 years and then worked in other settings since, because we've moved around a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can say, I don't have the exact numbers on hand, but I know that working 3 days a week in an outpatient setting, I was making as much as I made full time in a school. And I know that that's not, I'm talking hourly rates.
Right.
I know what I was making versus just, okay, you're not paid for the summers, you're paid on a 9 or 10 month calendar. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking, I could make as much as I was making in a school on 3 days a week in a different setting. And that's still doing speech therapy. So I know there's other fields that people are leaving for.
Yeah. And I think there's also major potential for SLPs who are school district employees or contractors for large firms to just become private practitioners who contract with school districts.
Make more money.
And have a lot more control over what the situation is. So, I think it is a matter of time unless something changes.
How many times do you see on the Facebooks the call for a national union for speech therapy, very similar to the NEA?
That would be great.
Is that the next step?
And for anybody listening, NEA, Matt?
National Education Association, the teachers union.
Okay.
OEA here in Ohio, the Ohio Education Association. I assume if your state has it, it's probably your state's initial.
Okay.
So we want to hear from you. How close are you to burnout? Are you like me, and every 4 to 5 years you have to have that conversation with your spouse, your wife, your husband? Hey, should I stay in my job? Should I leave my job? Let us know. speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com, speechsciencepodcast.com. Coming up around the break, we have our ASHA look, wrapping up this show, and then we are all going home. You're listening to Speech Science.
The Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council present the story of Cynthia and Ed.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, out of the blue, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. And she didn't know whether she should go forward or turn or just stay at the stop sign. She wasn't even really sure where she was at. She was very concerned. It was very unsettling for her.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it, to bring the family in on it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, I don't want you to worry or be afraid. I'll be there for you and we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Speech Science. I'm Matt Hott, joined by the other M, Michelle.
Hi.
The third M, Marie, is on vacation in Colorado. I hope she is enjoying it. Our double R's, Ruchi, hello.
Hi.
Rachel, hello.
Hi.
In case you're wondering why I choose that order, it is literally from who is top to bottom on my Zoom
your
meet.
Screen. Yep.
And it changes every time we log in, so no one knows who's first and who's second. I just love that. As we come back in, I want to know, what was your favorite game as a kid, young adult, or in college?
Cards Against Humanity.
Oh my God, you're so young. I think that came out after grad school for me, or like in grad school.
I don't know when it came
I'm not
out
judging.
for me.
I'm not judging. That was my initial reaction. I was going to say I love Stratego as a kid because I am a nerd. Michelle, Ruchi?
When I was a young kid, and I actually still have this game, I've taught it to my kids and I use it in therapy a lot. It's an old game from the 1980s called Kids on Stage. And it's a charades game. So basically charades for kids. But it's so great because it's just visual, simple icons. And you can act them out, or I mean, you can change it up for speech therapy. But I loved that game as a child, and I still have it. I'll have to post a picture of it or something. See if anyone else.
There's a new game out by that. It's $20 on Amazon.
Kids on Stage. Yeah.
Kids on Stage. Yeah.
I'll have to look it up and see if it's the same. And then the other game that I loved as I got older as a teen, I still like Apples to Apples.
Yeah.
That was the original that led to all the Cards Against Humanity and every variation out there.
Yeah, Matt. So this is specifically board games, right?
Any. I mean, mine was Madden Football, but that's pretty boring and typical.
Yeah, maybe any Zelda iteration. I would say in terms of board games, like Apples to Apples was definitely on there. Taboo was another one I really liked because you have to name synonyms, which is like my favorite thing under a time, and you have to see how good your
Taboo.
Yeah, yes. Taboo is like one of my favorites. Anything that's Jackbox games related.
Oh, you don't know Jack? I love that game.
Yeah. And so all these like current iterations are a lot of fun too. So yeah, I'm down for a lot of things.
I really enjoyed Mad Gab when that came out. I still have it. It's jumbled. You'll have somebody trying to read it, but it's not spelled right. So they're saying a common phrase that they don't realize is a common phrase, and they have to figure out what it is because they're reading it differently. It's an orange box. But I loved it years ago, and my husband pointed out to me, I was like, oh, I really like that game. He goes, of course you did. You're a speech therapist.
Yep.
Oh, well, there you go.
It's the same with that one that you put in that mouth guard thing that like stretches your cheeks out.
I haven't played that yet, but I think it would be fun.
I think SLPs would absolutely wreck at that game. Like, it's like, how do you know? It's like, well, I can see there's no lips.
What you're going for. Yeah. What you're going for.
Ruchi, you made me think of when you said, like, when you asked about the board games or video games, there was a TikTok that brought up the video game Myst. Do you guys remember the game Myst?
Oh, geez, Myst.
No.
I never got over the island. I could never get the first door unlocked. And that is all I remember of that game.
I played Myst at
Fireball
like school.
Island. They've remade. That made me think of Fireball Island. Did you ever play that one as a kid?
I have not.
Oh, I'll have to find it. We got to share some of these. I would love to hear people's favorite games as well.
Like the video or the board game Fireball Island?
Yes.
I just Googled it.
To be honest, board games really stress me out. I really don't enjoy them. I have a board game
tables behind me.
I really don't enjoy them.
It's covered with a bunch of junk. I want to hear from you.
Cards.
Speech Science Podcast. Oh, yeah, go for it. Sorry, Ruchi.
We're talking about games that you're going to play in the therapy room because I did invest quite a bit.
Talking about general, just games. Like,
I mean, I've just used some of the ones that I like in therapy. So.
I played Metal Gear Solid a lot. I don't think I could play that with a kid.
Yeah, I was like, you know what I would love to do in inpatient rehab is have somebody play Hitman, and just having to navigate. Did they hear you? Did you stun them? Did you do everything in a timely, appropriate?
Do you guys know what Metal Gear Solid is? Ruchi, you probably do.
Yes, I do.
Rachel, Michelle?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so it's a video game, and long story short, you're an unknown if you're a good guy or bad guy, depending on which version of the game you're playing. And you got to go through these different levels. And Metal Gear Solid 5, you have a way to either kill your opponents or stun your opponents. And I used to kill everyone until my son got old enough to ask me why I was killing everyone. So then I had to put them all to sleep, and then they kept waking back up. So
yeah, I always choose like minimum amount of damage, but it is like you have to do all this visual-spatial awareness. It's okay, Matt. We'll talk about it.
speechsciencepodcast@gmail.com. Hey, near the end of our show, we always like to take a look at what is going on in ASHA. Sometimes we love it. Sometimes we hate it. It's a section we call...
What Up, ASHA?
What Up, ASHA? This week in What Up, ASHA, it's the Leadership Mentoring Program. It is taking place. It is a 6-month mentoring program for current ASHA members. It's mentee-driven. Mentee should be self-motivated to prepare to determine the focus of the mentor relationship, and we'll be meeting at least once per month. They are allowing you to enroll as either a mentor or a mentee currently, and I am as what ASHA does good and bad, I'm a huge advocate of giving back to our field. If you are in a role that you could be a mentor to somebody, I think it's awesome. If you are in a position where you need to have a mentor, you need to be the mentee, that's okay too. There are so many people in this field that have so much to give. It doesn't matter if you're in for 1 year or 50 years. I think you can fit in both of these roles because people are so needed. I think it's such an awesome volunteer position.
It also says this program is mentee-driven. Mentees should be self-motivated and should be prepared to determine the focus of the mentor relationship based on their leadership development goals. And this kind of goes along with the last article that we talked about with burnout and everything. I see all these programs being offered, but I cannot mentally do anything more speech-related. I wish I had the bandwidth to do that. And this is something that I would like to do in the future. But SLPs are out right now, and it's really hard to get people to sign up for these kinds of things.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I mean, I've been an ASHA step mentor for most of the years since I've graduated, maybe like 2 years post-graduation I probably started. And I used to take 2 mentees, and then I was just like, I can only take 1. And then there are people you meet and you don't want them to feel like alone out in the world because they need the support. And so it is like definitely something where I have to be really aware of the energy that I put in. And I think, Rachel, you make a good point about us having to have like boundaries around what we can feasibly do versus, maybe there's a grant that is given to a bunch of mentors for providing the service, and then that's something that you can share, even if it's small. That would be something to consider.
And this is different than the step mentor, right? So this is a separate mentoring.
Yeah,
I think so.
I just wanted to clarify.
We'll have the link down in our show notes.
And it's also,
if you're able to, do it. If you're not, it's okay.
It's also another thing that I'm saying, I don't see anything about payment in this, so it's another thing that is unpaid for us to take on, if it is unpaid, but it's another SLP issue.
It says volunteer.
Yeah. Rachel asks all the right questions, which I think is
Thank
great.
you.
Well, as the music is playing underneath, I get to ask my favorite question of the show. What are you looking forward to in the next 7 to 10 days that is not therapy related? I am excited because by the time this show airs, I will be done with the school year. Michelle, Ruchi, Rachel, what are you looking forward to?
My
I also don't know why my voice got all soft there and radio, late night radio there. I'm so sorry.
My brothers are coming to visit Texas. I have 2 older brothers, and I don't get to see them nearly enough because we live far apart. And so just them, they are coming. We could have a sibling visit.
I'm going to LA this weekend for something that's therapy related, but I will do non-therapy related things.
Yes, you should.
Yes, so it'll be great.
I have been on autopilot for several weeks right after having COVID for the first time, so my body is like taking a hit.
The first time, right?
First time or the third time?
The third time, sorry.
Third time, there we go.
My brain is also taking a hit. So I plan on doing absolutely nothing this weekend. I am not going to talk to anyone. I'm going to be wrapped in a blanket and watch probably Queen Charlotte or something.
Do you need a Plex server to watch lots of James Bond movies?
Yes, please.
Our intro music tonight was Please Listen Carefully by Jazard's, licensed under an attribution and share alike license. Our bump music was The County Fair Rock, copyrighted John Day Koo. Find his music at soundcloud.com/dirtdogmusic. And our closing music is The Slow Burn by Kevin MacLeod. It's playing right now. It's licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution license. In the immortal words of Janice Wright, always be a willow. The oak looks strong, but in the first storm, it will crack. The willow will bend and return to form. For vacationing Willow Marie and current Willows Michelle, Ruchi, and Rachel, I'm Matt. Until next time, so long, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
We did it. Let me find the stop button.
Welcome.
Speech Science is edited and produced by MWH Production. Please follow Speech Science on Twitter at Speech Science PC and like our page on Facebook. And rate and subscribe to our podcast anywhere you get your podcasts.